All right, let's jump right in to this deep dive. And it's all about waste management. We're going to be talking about a product called BagEZ. It seems pretty simple, at least at first glance, but, it aims to tackle this huge global challenge. And that challenge is waste.
Yeah, it's a big one, isn't it?
It really is. You think about overflowing landfills, those low recycling rates, and, it's no secret we've got a serious environmental problem on our hands. It's pretty concerning when you start to think about the scale of it.
And it's not just the sheer volume of garbage, right?
Right.
We need to consider those resources we're just wasting, and then there's all the pollution that comes with it. And not to mention the economic inefficiencies. It's not just one problem. It's like this whole web of interconnected issues that we really need to address. We really need to get creative and find some innovative solutions.
Absolutely. I mean, we're literally drowning in garbage, right?
Right.
So what can we actually do about it? I mean, where do we even begin?
Well, there are a lot of strategies out there, but one of the most fundamental, and this is where it gets really interesting, is something called source separation.
Source separation. Okay, so what exactly is that?
Source separation is really the foundation of any effective waste management system. Basically, it just means separating waste into different categories, like your organics, your recyclables, and whatever's left over. And you do all this right where the waste is generated, like right there in your kitchen.
Oh, okay. So instead of shucking everything into one big bin, we're basically dividing and conquering our garbage. Okay, I get the logic there.
Right.
Does it really make that much of a difference? I mean, doesn't it all just end up in the same place eventually anyway?
That's a really common misconception. But it's super important to understand that proper source separation, it really does have ripple effects throughout the whole waste management system.
Okay.
Think about it this way. When recyclables get all contaminated with food waste, they often end up in the landfill anyway.
Oh, right. We're basically sabotaging our own recycling efforts if we don't separate correctly.
Exactly. And that defeats the whole purpose, right?
Right. So more recycling, less landfill waste. Obviously, that's good for the planet. But what are some of the other benefits?
Oh, there are so many. Increased recycling means we can recover more resources, which means we don't have to rely as much on those virgin materials.
Right.
So you're conserving natural resources. You're often using less energy to process recycled materials compared to producing new ones from scratch.
So win-win for the planet and for efficiency. Are there any economic benefits too?
Absolutely. Effective recycling programs, they create jobs. And not just in the obvious areas like sorting and processing.
Oh, right.
You have jobs in transportation, jobs in manufacturing using those recycled materials, research and development for new recycling technologies. It really is a whole ecosystem of economic activity.
Wow, I hadn't really considered that, the job creation aspect.
Yep.
But even with all these benefits, it seems like we're still facing this global waste crisis, right?
Right.
So what's holding us back from, really embracing better source separation?
Well, besides just needing better infrastructure and, more public awareness campaigns, one of the biggest hurdles is this surprisingly basic human factor.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
It's the yuck factor.
It's the yuck factor, okay.
Yeah, just think about it. Nobody enjoys dealing with rotting food scraps,
Right.
or smelly diapers, or the possibility of attracting pests to their garbage bins.
Yeah, not exactly a pleasant experience.
No. And this aversion, this ick feeling, that's what we call the yuck factor. And believe me, it can be a powerful deterrent to properly separating your waste.
So we're talking about almost like a visceral reaction, almost an instinct to avoid anything that seems, messy or unsanitary. But is it really that big of a deal? I mean, come on, it's just garbage.
Oh, it's a bigger deal than you might think. One study in Ontario, Canada, found that almost 40% of residents, they avoided using their green bins for organic waste. And that was just because they were worried about smell, mess, and pests. That's a huge chunk of valuable compostable material that's ending up in landfills. And it's all because people are essentially grossed out.
40%, that's a significant number.
Yeah. And it shows just how much this yuck factor is undermining our efforts to really recycle and compost effectively.
Wow, that's really eye-opening. So that's where this BagEZ thing comes in, right? It's supposed to help with this, right?
Exactly. BagEZ is designed to tackle this yuck factor head on. It makes organic waste disposal cleaner. It makes it more convenient, so people are more likely to actually do it.
So it's not just about being eco-conscious. It's about addressing this, real psychological barrier that people have?
Exactly.
Okay, so tell me more about this BagEZ. How does it actually work?
Well, BagEZ is essentially a garbage bag holder. It's designed to fit securely over the opening of your trash can. So you attach your garbage bag to it, and it creates this kind of hands-free system. That way, the waste doesn't directly touch the bin itself, and that really helps reduce mess and odor.
Okay, so you're preventing those like dreaded garbage juice spills and basically keeping your bin cleaner overall.
Exactly.
But how does that help with separating waste? I'm not quite following that.
You can think of it as like a dual container system within a single bin. So with BagEZ holding your organic waste separate, the rest of the bin can be used for your recyclables or your residual waste.
Ah, okay. So it's encouraging that initial separation right there at the source.
Right. And what's really great is that you can even use BagEZ if you don't have a separate green bin program in your municipality.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah. You're not limited by local infrastructure.
Right.
It really allows individuals to take control of their waste sorting and make a difference, regardless of where they live. It could even be a stepping stone toward wider adoption of green bin programs, right?
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, because as people get used to separating their waste at home, they might start, demanding that service from their municipalities. They see the value in it, and they want the infrastructure to support it.
So it's almost like empowering people to make a change, even if the larger systems aren't quite there yet. I like that.
Yeah.
So let's say more people start using something like BagEZ, and this yuck factor becomes less of an obstacle. What kind of real-world impact are we talking about here? Like, give me some specifics.
Okay, well, the region of Peel in Ontario, Canada, they provide a really compelling example. Their current organic waste capture rate is only around 48%, which means a little over half of their organic waste is still going to landfills. But if a product like BagEZ could even just nudge that rate up by, say, 2%.
2%, that seems kind of small, but...
Yeah, I know it sounds small, but think about what that 2% increase actually represents.
Okay, I'm listening.
For the region of Peel, that 2% would mean diverting an extra 10,000 tons of organic waste from landfills every year.
10,000 tons? That's a lot of garbage.
It is. And to put that into perspective, that's enough waste to generate electricity for almost 200 homes for an entire year through something called anaerobic digestion.
Hold on. Anaerobic digestion.
Yeah.
What is that?
So anaerobic digestion is this really cool process. Basically, microorganisms break down that organic waste in an oxygen-free environment. And this process, it produces biogas, which can then be used to generate electricity or heat. And then there's this byproduct called digestate.
Okay.
And digestate is this nutrient-rich material that can be used as fertilizer. So essentially, you're turning waste into this valuable resource.
So not only are we reducing landfill waste, but we're also creating clean energy and fertilizer from it. That's pretty amazing. And all that from a better garbage bag holder.
Right.
That's a pretty impressive domino effect.
And let's not forget the impact on greenhouse gases, too. Landfills are a major source of methane, that potent greenhouse gas that contributes to climate change.
Right, right.
So by diverting that 10,000 tons of organic waste, we'd also be preventing the release of about 340 metric tons of methane into the atmosphere.
Okay, so significant environmental benefits. But what about the economic side of things? I know we talked about job creation earlier, but are there other economic advantages to this?
Absolutely. When you improve recycling rates, you reduce our reliance on those virgin materials, which often have much higher extraction and processing costs. And then there's the issue of landfill space.
Right.
Landfills are expensive to operate, and we're frankly running out of space for them.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So reducing the amount of waste going to landfills saves money. It avoids the need to create new ones. And it also opens up opportunities for those alternative waste management technologies, like anaerobic digestion, which can actually generate revenue.
So we're saving money, we're conserving resources, and we're creating jobs. That's a pretty compelling argument for better waste management practices.
It really is. And while BagEZ might seem like just a small piece of the puzzle, it has the potential to contribute to a much larger shift toward a more sustainable and efficient waste management system.
Okay, so we've laid out the problem, we've talked about potential solutions, and we've even, delved into some compelling data. But I'm sure some listeners might be thinking, okay, this all sounds great in theory, but what about the practicalities? So let's address some common concerns that people might have about using something like BagEZ.
Okay, I'm happy to tackle those. What are you thinking?
Well, for starters, what if the bag rips, that would kind of defeat the whole purpose of keeping things clean and contained, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's a valid concern. Nobody wants garbage spilling all over their bin. The key is to use those, good quality garbage bags. And you can even double them up for extra security. Some people even like to put a layer of newspaper at the bottom of the bag just to absorb any potential leaks, just in case.
Good tips.
Yeah.
What about condensation? When you have food scraps in a container, you often get that buildup of moisture. Would that be an issue with BagEZ?
It's a good question, and it's something that the designers actually considered. Because the bag is suspended, it's not sitting directly on the bottom of the bin, right? So that allows for better air circulation, which helps to evaporate any moisture and prevent those puddles of, shall we say, garbage juice from forming.
So air circulation is key. But what about those of us who are, shall we say, prone to forgetfulness?
Yeah.
What if you accidentally leave the baggies in the bin when you take it out for collection?
Well, that's where a little visual reminder can be really handy. BagEZ actually comes with a bright sticker that you can put on your bin lid. So it's right there staring you in the face.
Okay. A little nudge like, hey, don't forget me.
Exactly.
Another worry some people might have is pests, especially with organic waste. Does BagEZ offer any solutions for that?
Well, one of the biggest benefits of BagEZ is that it helps to reduce odors, which, as we know, is a major attractant for pests. So by keeping the bin cleaner and containing the waste more effectively, you're already making it less appealing to those critters.
Okay. So cleanliness is the first line of defense. But are there any additional measures that people can take?
Absolutely. You can use garbage bags specifically designed to repel animals.
Oh, interesting.
They're often scented with mint or other scents that pests dislike. And some people also swear by natural repellents like sprinkling cloves around the bin or using a vinegar spray.
Okay. It sounds like there are quite a few options for keeping those pesky critters at bay.
There are. And, another thing you can do just to achieve that professional level cleanliness is give your bin a quick spray with an antibacterial cleaner before you put a new bag in.
Oh.
It kills germs, eliminates any lingering odors,
Yeah.
and just makes the whole experience more hygienic.
That's a great tip. So we've covered a lot of ground here. The importance of source separation, the yuck factor challenge, and how BagEZ aims to address those issues. But I'm struck by how this seemingly simple product could have implications beyond, just individual households.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's one of the most exciting aspects of BagEZ. It's adaptable to so many settings. Think about residential buildings, commercial establishments, even public spaces.
Okay, I'm all ears. Let's explore those possibilities.
So picture this. A large apartment complex. Space is usually pretty tight, right?
Right.
And managing all that waste efficiently, that's a real challenge. But you know what? BagEZ can help residents separate their waste right there in their apartments.
Okay.
It just makes it easier for, building management to implement those effective recycling and composting programs.
So it's like a space-saving solution for those multi-unit dwellings?
Exactly.
Makes sense. Okay. What about businesses? I imagine restaurants and cafes, they must generate a ton of food waste.
Oh, absolutely. Tons. And those kinds of places, they could really benefit from a system like BagEZ. Not only would it streamline their waste management, but think about it.
Yeah.
Cleaner, more hygienic environment for both the staff and the customers, right?
And let's not forget about the visual aspect. Nobody wants to see overflowing bins of messy food waste.
Exactly. Aesthetics are important too, right?
Right.
And BagEZ, it just offers a more discreet and, visually appealing solution.
Yeah.
Especially in those customer-facing areas.
Right. Okay, so we've got residential buildings, we've got businesses. Where else could this BagEZ thing make a difference?
Think about public spaces, parks, beaches, event venues. These are places where just keeping things clean can be a nightmare. And so often, proper waste separation, it just kind of falls by the wayside.
Yeah, I can see how BagEZ would be helpful in those situations. It could encourage people to dispose of their waste properly, especially in areas where maybe there aren't a lot of trash cans or, the signage isn't very clear.
Right. It's all about making it easy and convenient for people to actually do the right thing.
Right.
It's like a little nudge in the right direction.
I like that. Okay. So we've established that BagEZ has the potential to impact waste management beyond, just our own kitchens. But you mentioned earlier that it could be a stepping stone toward a broader shift in how we think about and deal with waste in general.
Right. What I think is really interesting is that BagEZ aligns with this larger movement toward a zero waste future. It's not just about managing waste better, it's about reducing waste in the first place.
Okay, so how does a product like BagEZ help us do that?
Well, think about the materials. BagEZ itself is designed to be durable and reusable, right? So you're cutting down on the need for all those disposable products. And by encouraging people to separate their organic waste, we're diverting that valuable compostable material from landfills.
So it's like a two-pronged approach. Reduce waste at the source and then make better use of the waste that we do generate.
Exactly. It's about creating that circular system where waste is seen as a resource, not just something to be thrown away.
That's a pretty powerful shift in perspective. It's not just about throwing things away. It's about like rethinking the whole life cycle of the products that we consume.
And that's where innovations like BagEZ, they can really play a catalytic role. They give people a practical, tangible way to participate in this larger movement toward a more sustainable future.
It's easy to get overwhelmed by the scale of this global waste crisis. But hearing about products like BagEZ, it makes me feel hopeful. It shows that we don't have to wait for governments or corporations to solve the problem. We can all take action in our own lives and make a difference.
Absolutely. It's about empowering individuals to be part of the solution. And so often, those small individual actions, they can collectively lead to some really significant change.
So we've talked about, the futures, the benefits, the broader implications. But I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on this yuck factor thing? Is it something that we can truly overcome? Or, is it just human nature to be grossed out by garbage?
It's complicated. That aversion to things that are messy or smelly, that's deeply ingrained in our biology. It's a survival mechanism that's been around for millennia.
So it's not just about being squeamish. It's like an evolutionary response. But, we're not living in caves anymore. We have modern sanitation systems.
Yeah.
Logically, we know that handling our garbage properly, it's not going to make us sick.
Right. So it's about figuring out how to bridge that gap between our, instinctive reactions and our rational understanding of the situation.
So is that where design comes in? Can we design products and systems that minimize that yuck factor and make waste management more appealing?
Absolutely. I think that's one of those brilliant things about BagEZ. It addresses that emotional aspect of waste management, by making the whole experience cleaner, more convenient.
It's almost like we're tricking our brains into being more willing to do the right thing.
Kind of, yeah. By reducing those negative sensory experiences associated with garbage, we can lower the psychological barrier to properly separating our waste.
It makes me think about those public service announcements that try to scare people into recycling, showing images of overflowing landfills, polluted oceans. Maybe a more effective approach would be to focus on the positive, to make sustainable choices feel good, both literally and figuratively.
I think there's a lot of value in that approach. Positive reinforcement can be incredibly powerful.
Right.
When we see ourselves actually taking action and making a difference, it just reinforces those behaviors and it encourages us to do more.
It's like BagEZ isn't just a tool for managing waste. It's also a tool for cultivating a more eco-conscious mindset.
I like that. It's about seeing those small, everyday actions as part of a larger effort to create a more sustainable future.
And those small actions can be surprisingly powerful. If something as simple as a better garbage bag holder can help reduce our environmental impact, imagine what we could achieve if we applied that same kind of ingenuity and intentionality to other areas of our lives.
It's a very inspiring thought, isn't it?
Right.
It all comes back to that power of individual choice and the collective impact that those choices can have.
Absolutely. And speaking of individual choice, I think it's important to address a question that some listeners might be wondering. What if you live in an area where there isn't a municipal green bin program? Does that mean you can't compost your organic waste?
Not at all. There are tons of ways to compost at home, even without a fancy program.
Okay. Like what?
Well, one popular option is backyard composting.
Oh, yeah, the classic.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. It's effective. It turns kitchen scraps and yard waste into this nutrient-rich compost. You can buy compost bins, or you can even build your own.
So it's a DIY solution that, anyone can try. Are there any other options for people who, maybe they don't have a backyard or space for a, traditional compost bin?
Definitely. There's vermicomposting, sometimes called worm composting. It's great if you've got limited space.
Worms.
Yeah, worms.
Okay.
You're basically using worms to break down that organic waste in a contained system. You can even do it indoors.
Indoors with worms.
Yeah. It's a super cool process, and it doesn't smell.
Okay. Well, that's good to know.
Yeah, it's amazing. You're harnessing the power of nature to turn your garbage into something valuable.
I like that. All right, so we've got backyard composting, we've got worm composting. Any other methods we should talk about?
Oh, there are also bokashi composting systems. They use this special fermentation process to break down food waste. They're really good for handling a wider range of food scraps, even things like meat and dairy, which you usually can't put in those traditional compost piles.
Okay. So there's really like a composting solution for everyone, regardless of your, living situation or your lifestyle.
Exactly. You just got to find a method that fits your needs and your comfort level,
All
right?
right.
And even if you can't compost at home, a lot of communities have composting programs or drop-off locations where you can take your food scraps.
So no excuses. We can all do our part.
Right.
It's amazing that we can transform, what we often see as just waste into a valuable resource, something that like nourishes our gardens and helps reduce our environmental impact.
It really is a beautiful cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And it all starts with that decision, to separate our waste and think differently about what we throw away.
Okay. So we've explored all these different composting methods, and I think it's important to highlight that, BagEZ, it can actually complement these approaches. It's not about choosing one or the other. It's about finding a system that works best for you.
Yeah. BagEZ can be a really great tool for collecting and storing your food scraps until you're ready to, add them to your compost bin or take them to a facility.
Right. So it's about making that process, a little bit easier, a little bit more convenient, which ultimately makes it more sustainable in the long run.
Exactly. And that's why it's so exciting to see innovations like BagEZ come along. They're not just about selling a product. They're about starting a conversation, getting people to think about waste in a new way.
And that brings us to another interesting point. We've talked about, all the practical and environmental benefits of BagEZ, but I think there's also this social aspect to consider.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more.
Well, I'm thinking that using a product like BagEZ, it could actually change the way we interact with our neighbors and our community as a whole. Like imagine, seeing someone using BagEZ and it sparks this conversation about composting or recycling. It could have this ripple effect.
I love that. It's about creating that sense of, shared responsibility.
Right.
And fostering a culture of sustainability in our communities.
Yeah, it's not just about individual actions. It's about how those actions can inspire and influence others.
But one of the most powerful ways to spread a message is through social proof. When people see their friends or their neighbors doing something, it just makes it seem more normal. And then they're more likely to adopt that behavior themselves.
Right. So it's not just about the product itself. It's about the message it sends, the conversations it starts.
Exactly. It's about building that community around sustainability.
And that sense of community is so important because it reminds us that, we're not alone in this. We're all in this together. And even those, seemingly small actions that we take can have this ripple effect.
I couldn't agree more. It's about recognizing that we're part of something bigger than ourselves. And, our choices, they really do matter. They have the power to make a difference.
Well said. As we're wrapping up this deep dive into the world of BagEZ and waste management, I'm struck by this sense of, possibility. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by, the enormity of it all, but it's also really inspiring to see how innovation and creativity can lead to real, tangible solutions.
It's a good reminder that we have the power to shape a better future.
Yeah.
But it all starts with action. Even those baby steps, right?
Yes.
Recognizing that those small steps matter.
And sometimes those steps are as simple as, just choosing a better garbage bag holder.
Exactly. And that brings me to a question I want to leave our listeners with.
Oh, okay. I'm intrigued. What's the question?
Could something, as seemingly insignificant as like a garbage bag holder, could that really be a catalyst for change? Could it really shift how we approach like the whole concept of waste management?
That's a really interesting question. We've spent, this whole deep dive talking about BagEZ, and I mean, it seems like such a small thing.
Right. It's not like some, flashy new technology or some big policy initiative. It's a really simple tool. It's practical. It's just designed to address that one specific problem, the yuck factor.
But as we've been talking about, that yuck factor is a huge barrier. It prevents a lot of people from really embracing source separation. And, as we've established, source separation, that's key for effective recycling and composting.
Exactly. And if BagEZ can help people get over that, that initial aversion, if it can make source separation more appealing, that could have like a domino effect. It could impact the whole waste management system.
Right. More people composting, more people recycling correctly. That means less waste ending up in landfills, which has all those, positive environmental and economic benefits that we talked about.
Exactly. It's those small changes that add up to big results. And I think what's so cool about BagEZ is that it puts the power right there in the hands of individuals. You don't have to wait for your city to start a green bin program. You don't have to wait for a big corporation to change its ways. You can take action today, right now, in your own home.
It's that, that feeling of empowerment that I think is so important, and it reminds us that we're not just passive consumers. We can make choices, and those choices have an impact.
Absolutely. And, when we make those conscious choices that really reflect our values, it can have a positive effect on us too. There's actually more and more research showing that people who engage in pro-environmental behaviors tend to be happier. They have a greater sense of purpose. It can even improve your mental health.
So it's not just about saving the planet. It's about feeling good about ourselves and the choices we make.
Exactly. It's finding that place where, sustainability and well-being, they come together.
That's a good point. And that kind of brings us back to, I think, this question of individual versus collective action, right? We can do all the right things in our own lives, but ultimately, I think we need those bigger systemic changes to really address, the global waste crisis.
I agree. We need governments to step up and implement policies that incentivize recycling and composting. They need to support those new technologies, and hold those corporations accountable for their environmental impact. We need that top-down approach.
But while we're pushing for those larger changes, the systemic changes, we can also be making a difference in our own communities, right? I mean, imagine if using something like BagEZ became a conversation starter, like a way to connect with your neighbors, share knowledge about, sustainable living practices.
I love that. It's about building that culture of sustainability, right? Where those conversations are happening all the time, and, sustainable actions, they just become the norm.
Right. And it reminds us that, we're not in this alone. We're all in this together. And even those small steps that we take, they can really make a difference.
Absolutely.
And speaking of those small steps, I want to circle back to something we talked about earlier, composting at home. I think it's really important to emphasize that, BagEZ isn't meant to replace composting. It can actually be a really great tool for people who are already composting.
Totally. BagEZ can make that whole process of collecting and storing your food scraps much cleaner, much more convenient.
Yeah.
Especially if you're, working with limited space, or if you're worried about smells.
Right. It's like the connecting piece between your kitchen and your compost bin. Just makes the whole thing more enjoyable, less of a chore.
And that's important, because the easier and more enjoyable we make these sustainable practices, the more likely people are to stick with them.
Right. Yeah. It's about, building those habits, making them part of our everyday routine.
Exactly. It's been really fascinating to dive into this topic with you today. We've explored the challenges, we've looked at the innovations, and we've really talked about that power of individual choice.
Yeah, it really has been a great conversation. And I have to say, I'm walking away with a renewed sense of optimism. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by it all, but it's also incredibly inspiring to see how, human ingenuity and just plain creativity can lead to real solutions.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that we have the power to change things for the better, but we have to act, even if it's just, those small steps, recognizing that those steps matter.
And sometimes those steps are as simple as, I don't know, maybe just buying a better garbage bag holder.
Exactly. And with that, I think, it's time to wrap things up. But before we go, I want to leave our listeners with, just a little something to think about.
Okay, I'm all ears. What's your final thought?
If you're interested in BagEZ, take a look, learn more about it, see if it's something that might work for you. And beyond that, I just want to encourage everyone to, keep exploring, keep questioning, and just keep making those choices that create a better world.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you found it informative, maybe even inspiring. And remember, every choice matters.